and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, we're men of a certain age, and the devices that we're going to talk about today are probably things that we're going to be forced into using at some point in our dotage.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Our guest will probably confirm the numbers, but yeah, there is a possibility. We're going to talk today about catheters. Now, many of you listening might well have come across them in your family, with friends, or even yourself. And what we're going to do is explore an innovation that this chap's responsible for. His name is Ed Cappabianca, and Ed actually is an American, but basically he's living over here in the UK. Ed, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Kevin. Really nice to be joining you both.
Well, let's get to it. Kevin's sort of supposition is that, we're men of a certain age, mid-60s for me, and basically, I suppose that increases the likelihood that the sort of things down at that end of the body conspire towards needing some sort of catheter. What are the chances? What are the chances that we might actually require a catheter out of, 100 people? How many men are likely to require them?
So it's a great question, and the important thing about the use of catheters is that there are so many different medical conditions that all of which end up converging on impacting somebody's ability to do something as simple, as peeing. Men of a certain age, basically, what a lot of people don't realize is that the prostate, which is a gland that sits just south of your bladder, but wraps around your urethra. Men have it, women don't. But that gland basically grows throughout your whole life. Some men it'll grow faster, others it'll grow slower. And sometimes that growth is cancerous, but what the medical world has realized is it isn't always. So that one thing, it's called BPH, benign prostate hyperplasia, is basically an enlarged prostate. And that is a major reason for men. But there are other things like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injuries, spina bifida, just general obesity. Any and all of these things can impact. If we stay just with the BPH, here in the UK, there are somewhere between 50 and 100,000 men who are awaiting a surgery to reduce their prostate. And that proportionally is, the same in every country. So those men who are awaiting that surgery may very well need some sort of a catheter in order to relieve that pressure on the bladder.
It must be, the actual, we've talked about this before, Ed, because just for the listeners, Ed and I have worked together for a little while, and basically every time I think about it, there's a sort of, is it called a psychosomatic sort of thing that happens down there, and you just think, crikey, what's going on?
Absolutely.
You're almost imagining this is happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a sensitive area. We all pee, people like me with diabetes several times a day. So basically, the whole idea of this is that you figured out that the standard for catheters is something called the Foley catheter. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So actually, you can go back into ancient history, and there have been catheters to relieve, and the medical condition we're talking about here, by the way, is called urinary retention, as in you're retaining your urine and you don't want to because you've had a blockage or there's some other problem. The opposite of retention is incontinence, which means that you don't want to go, but you can't control and you have an accident. Yeah. But retention is medically much more serious, and you can actually find in ancient history all the way back to the ancient Greeks, where they were using literally straw reeds to relieve that pressure and tension. into the 1700s, they used things like gold and silver tubing to put up the urethra, again, in order to relieve that pressure. Now, the Foley catheter was invented by a guy named Foley, not surprising, around World War One. And this was because there were an awful lot of men who were in hospital beds having been injured, and they needed a way to relieve themselves. So for those patients, and even today, most people, if they go into hospital for a procedure, will get a Foley catheter put into them for a temporary period of time. But over the past roughly 100 years, we've all become more mobile. We're getting older. And so the Foley catheter is used now in community settings, ambulatory settings. And it's a big problem because if you use it just for a couple of days, that's one thing. But if you use it for a long period of time, what you're doing is opening the body to a risk of infection, basically creating a superhighway for bacteria to get up into your bladder. And that is not only bad for the patient, obviously, but it becomes a big burden on the healthcare system. So the Foley catheter is a catheter that sits indwelling in the patient for a long period of time, and it's anchored into the bladder by a tiny balloon. The tube comes out of the body, and then the bag will either sit on a hospital bed or, more often nowadays, it's strapped to the patient's leg, and they walk around with it. And it's unsightly, it's uncomfortable, and as I say, it's a big source of infection.
Not the sort of thing that you want to wear to the swimming pool, Ed. It's.
No.
I mean, these kinds of problems are just so well known to certain people, but to many others, they're not. But what's really encouraged me about you and your company is that you've taken on this. Okay, it's gone back, I don't know,
Yeah.
3,000 years, but the standard of care now is the Foley
Mhm.
catheter, as you've just
Well,
described.
Graham, there's one other as well, which
Okay.
is a little bit more recent, but it kind of goes back in history to
Right.
those straw reeds and those silver and gold tubes I was talking about.
Yeah.
That's called an intermittent catheter. Now, intermittent basically from time to time, but today they're not gold, silver, or straw. Today they're silicon, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
The problem with those ones is that they are a single-use disposable silicon device.
Right.
And so, again, that's fine for retention. It doesn't help for incontinence, but those devices as well have their own problems. And part of those problems are inconvenience, but another is the amount of waste that they produce.
The
Our
waste thing is staggering because I mean these things are um, as I understand it, I've got 12 billion pounds is deployed into the UK healthcare system. That's healthcare. It's the highest on record. Healthcare is growing in this country. And yet things like catheters, when you've got these things that are failing every month or whatever, maybe
Mhm.
several times, causing kinds of problems, infection, that, my wife's nursing a cold at the moment, and basically, you're doing everything. I'm trying to perhaps live in a different house. I mean, that might help. I don't know, maybe not. But the point is, you do everything to try and prevent that from happening. And the NHS is, it's not a bad organization, but heck, they're getting all kinds of infections because they're deploying something that's
Yep.
not fit for purpose. So
Mhm.
I know we've got different types of catheters, as you've explained. What's different about yours?
So our catheter was originally invented by a guy, like a lot of big innovations, who was solving his own problem. And he, as a younger man, he was on holiday with his family, and he was taking a picture. It was somewhere in the South Pacific. And he stepped a little bit further back to get a better angle, a little further back. And unfortunately, he didn't see where he was, and he fell down a cliff. And the good news for Phil is that he survived, obviously, but he became a walking paraplegic. And that's yet another one of the conditions, as I say, spinal cord injury, where you can have a problem. He can get around, but the nerve endings in that part of his body got messed up and he couldn't pee anymore. So he was having to do this thing called intermittent self-catheterization, ISC, um, five, maybe seven times a day. And he found it unbelievably inconvenient because you've always got to find a quiet and private place to do it. You've got to put that tube up your own urethra. And sometimes it can be a bit painful, inconvenient, but oftentimes it's not going to be in the cleanest of environments. So the good news for Phil as well is that he happened to have gone to MIT in the US. He had an engineering brain and he thought, I can think of something better than this. So what he developed was the first generation of our device. We're currently on our second generation, and we've got a pipeline of other innovative products around the core idea that Phil came up with. So our device does not have any external tubes or bags. It stays in the patient for up to 30 days, and then it can be replaced, a bit like contact lenses are replaced daily. And the big innovation is that there is an integral valve, the core of which Phil's original design was, and that valve is controlled by the patient themselves using an external magnet. So it's the simplest of ideas, really, in that there's a tiny little sphere in our catheter that is in the natural closed position, and then an external magnet pulls that sphere out of position, opens a valve. The patient's able to void their bladder completely, and then just by removing the magnet away, the sphere always moves back into place, which is basically plugging the stopper. It's as simple as that.
Can you imagine you've been at the football, Kevin, and you're surrounded by all these people? Nobody would really know, you know? I mean, nobody would know.
This sounds like a great device for, it's 10 minutes till the final whistle. The game's in a crucial moment, and you really don't want to be nipping down into the stand for a pee.
Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking about half time, to be honest with you, Kevin. I mean, if you're at Leeds, you wouldn't want to miss any of the game. Newcastle,
That's what I mean. You
understand.
don't want to miss any of the game,
But no, see, is it presumably because it's well, let's just think about it in terms of pain. There's probably a
Mhm.
little bit of pain getting it in and a little bit of pain
It,
getting it out.
it, I describe it more as discomfort,
All
you
right.
know.
Okay.
But the the and again, this first device we have developed is for men.
Hmm.
We are in development for a device for women, and we're in development for a device for men that would be for incontinence as well as retention. But as I say, retention is the more medically serious
Yeah.
situation, and there are an awful lot of men who are awaiting a surgical procedure to reduce their prostate size,
Yeah.
and it's those men in particular who are our first patient population that we're seeking to help. And so, yeah, it's
Okay. So the benefits, I think, to the population, well, just to the UK, and
mhm.
I know that we have listeners right around the world. I mean, many of them, Kevin was telling me the other night that many of them in the United States, Ed, you'd be surprised to hear. And oddly, given that I kind of favour Trump usually, the West Coast kind of likes us as well. So I don't know, something's going on over there. They might think Kevin's a Democrat, but you know, I mean, he probably is. But what can I say? But the beauty of what out of our podcast is it gets right round the world. Now, this
Mhm.
particular subject is going to be news everywhere. It's really going to be news, but it's going to save the National Health Service or the local health services of
Yeah.
different countries money. Why does it just talk? Kevin's an accountant, so he'll be
Well,
busy
Okay.
writing it down.
Graham, I'm putting on a hat from my consulting career, where one of the things I did on a number of occasions was write business cases for transformations within the NHS. So
Mhm.
I'm well aware of the classic way that you would write a business case for some new innovation. And I'm already seeing the benefits analysis clicking away here.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's explore that.
So yeah,
So
walk us through the savings then, Ed, if you would.
yeah, Graham, you're absolutely right. We have a truly global opportunity here. And in fact, I can tell you, as a small company, we've had contact from the US, China, India, very far afield, people who are desperate to have something other than what they're doing. In terms of just staying close to home here in the UK, the NHS spends roughly 175 million pounds a year buying catheters. Okay. But because the Foley catheter has been around for nearly 100 years, it's individually, it's very cheap, right? Maybe, 10 to 50 pounds for a device and all the other, bags and tubes that go with it. That being said, that 175 million pound number that I mentioned, 90% by value of that spend is actually on these newer intermittent catheters. Okay.
Mm.
So they are quite expensive because although they only cost a pound or two or three per device, when you're using 5 or 8 per day
That's
over
crazy.
a month's period, that ramps up really quickly.
Yeah.
So where we're sitting is one of our devices is equivalent to a whole month of intermittent catheters. But when you compare the full cost of ownership, which I'm sure, Kevin, you can appreciate, each time a long-term catheter user gets an infection, it costs the NHS somewhere between 2,000 and 3,500 pounds per treatment cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's hospital days, it's antibiotics, and it can be treating things as serious as sepsis and even death. So when you add that into the cost of the Foleys, because that's where most of those infections come from, the Foley catheter on a fully costed basis can be something like 800 pounds a month over a year's time.
Okay. And that sounds like an extraordinarily large number. I'm grateful to the NHS because of, they've thrown pills at me for my diabetes. But at the end of the day, I wish they'd throw less at me. But having said that, they're trying their best. But here we are, potentially £800 a month compared to your product. Now, you're going to have to pronounce the product's name. I always struggle with the product's name.
So the product is called the SimActive Bladder Management System, and it is designed to replace we think it's the best of both worlds of a Foley catheter or an intermittent because it goes into the patient for up to 30 days and it allows that patient to pee as and when they need to. But also, really importantly, the other key element of our design is that the patient's urethra seals over the end of the valve. So, and basically your urethra is a mucosal membrane that is like a flattened tube 99.9% of the time, except when you're peeing out.
Yeah.
And it's designed that way to prevent infection coming back in. So, although we don't have clinical evidence yet, we have some very strong, what I would call anecdotal data, but we are in the process of building that pure clinical evidence. But the design of what we've got is intended to work with the body's own natural defenses against infection by allowing that end of the urethra to seal off like it, quote unquote, normally should.
And that prevents the sorts of infections that alternative catheters don't prevent. And so,
Yeah.
this sounds like it's just too obvious a choice to swap from what we have been doing to what the
Mm-hmm.
future's going to be. Because you are going to be the future, unless somebody else comes along
Yeah.
and does it even better than you, which I doubt. But at the end of
Well,
the day, well, it's a competitive world. But
Graham, so I joined Ingenion about a little over 6 years ago now. And one of the first things I did when I was thinking about joining is I looked out to see, are there other people trying to solve this problem? in large part because I always think if nobody else is trying to do this, maybe it's a problem not worth solving. But what I can tell you is there are a number of other companies that are seeking to do something similar to us, but we have a significant advantage over them in a couple of ways. Number one, we're the only one. We have a CE mark device that's in the market that people are using. But the other key thing is the nature and style of our valve design is, you're familiar with, or you may, or the audience might be familiar with something called Occam's razor.
Mhm.
The simplest answer is always going to be the best.
Yeah.
So we design of our valve, which is a single small sphere that moves out of position and moves back. It's the simplest possible design I can possibly think of. The others who are like us are much more complicated. That complication means higher cost to make them individually, but also risk that that valve system that they've created might fail.
I'll be honest with you, the higher the cost, the less likely the 1.4 billion people in India are going to benefit from this. Because it's got to be of a reasonable market cost for countries to adopt it. And India is just an example. But basically, you've got that type of country right around the world. We're not all living in the UK or the US or Switzerland where there's wealth. At the end of the day, there are countries that probably equally need this for their own populations.
Sure.
So not only do you have, I think there's a massive opportunity for Ingenion. I really do. I think there's a big opportunity in this country because, well, the NHS, as Kevin says, presumably you're as good as Kevin at writing these business cases, because I do know you're very well educated, Ed. So Kevin went to some sort of secondary modern up in Newcastle. I don't know about anything else, but you obviously went to some very well. What was it again? This high flying university.
So my undergraduate studies were in biochemistry, but I took my MBA from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania.
That's pretty impressive, I've got to say, Kevin. I mean, that beats your secondary modern, Kevin, doesn't it?
Graham, quite.
Sorry, Kevin gets used to me taking a mick, but he's very well educated.
No, there's certainly something here. That's the device itself. Well, you're using one instead of 30 of them. So even if it's a slightly more expensive device, you're saving the cost of 30 of the other sort.
Actually, there'll be, Kevin, I don't know about you, but I tend to pee maybe 4, 5, 7 times a day.
Yeah.
So you're actually looking at 150 to 200 devices that one of ours replaces in a month's time.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a lot. But the other thing, again, it maybe takes a little bit to get your head around what that means. You have to think about how many times you might need to pee if you go out of your house. So how many of these do I have to bring with me?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a quiet, private place where I can wash my hands and all that sort of thing each time I need to pee? Or if I'm out walking around camping, am I going to be able to do it outside? So there's those sorts of issues, by the way, then impact whether somebody's even willing to leave their house. It also impacts them by saying, hey, maybe if I don't drink as much water or tea, I won't pee as much. And that can create dehydration. And dehydration has a knock-on effect to things like even dementia. They've seen very clear, linkages in that way. So we've got a massive other ways that this simple little thing that we're doing, we think is going to help and improve people's lives.
You've pivoted from cost, which is Kevin, really, and that's your point, really, Kevin. But you were leading that conversation a little bit there, Kevin. But Ed, you've pivoted into the user experience, the way in which I don't want to have to do this every damn day or every time I want to pee, because you're half awake at the middle of the morning and it's 3 o'clock and I don't be I
And
just
you're going to take one of these old traditional things into that filthy little corner of the Standard Ellen Road, Graham. You really don't want to be doing it.
no,
Yeah.
anyway, but you're right. You're definitely right. But the beauty is you're almost handing back somebody's life. As you say, I can
Hmm.
drink what I want. I can go wherever I want. And it's cheaper for the NHS. What's not to
It
like? So the NHS must be laying out the red carpet for you, Ed.
So actually, yeah, we're really, really pleased and thrilled with the level of interaction we've been having with the NHS. So where that works is that the NHS, its overall budget works on what are called framework agreements. Okay. So just for the bladder and bowel management, so that's, both peeing and pooing, um, there is a 2 plus 2 year framework agreement that gets rolled on every roughly 4 years. And the last time that that got renewed was actually in February of 2024. We got our CE mark in March of 2024. So we just missed. And we thought to ourselves, well, it's going to be a while. But we started a conversation with them in August of 2024 to understand these things.
Mhm.
They then called us back in October. Now, that is 18 months ago, and that sounds like a long time. It's a long time for a small company, but let me tell you, the innovation team at the NHS have been so great and supportive to us. And what they did is they created a new channel, aside from that whole framework agreement, which is 18 different channels of products, each of which has lots of different suppliers. So channel number one is catheters. Okay. Channel number three is catheter accessories. I don't remember what the other ones are. They realized that we are so innovative, we don't fit into any of the other 18 channels of the existing framework agreement. So they went about creating a new channel just for our device. They had to open a tender, and that anybody else who had a male intraurethral magnetically controlled catheter could apply to be part of that framework. And guess what? We
You
were the
did.
only ones.
Yeah. Well, presumably you've got patents for all of these anyway, so nobody else could be. But that's
Exactly.
great. But that says to me that the NHS are wisely looking at their budgets, wisely looking at their patients' interests.
Hmm.
And because, the more you think about this is why ever since I've got to know you, this product really needs to be launched quickly and adopted quickly by the NHS. Is there a reason why they wouldn't do that, Ed?
Um, right now, my feeling is the key thing we need is to build awareness. So just this podcast alone, if we can get this known into more people's, brains. So I look at the adoption issue as almost like a wall. We need to scale it from one side, and we're talking to clinicians all the time. Just 2 weeks ago, we were exhibiting at the European Association of Urology Congress that was held in London this year. It's held in a different European city every year. This year it was in London, and I got to tell you, we were mobbed by urologists and nurses, many of whom, actually, there was one guy specifically, he said, I've been a urologist for 25 years. I've always been trying to think of something that can help people. He's like, I feel a little silly that I didn't think of this because it's so amazing. The other side of it, though, is the user side, the patient side, and building awareness amongst patient affinity groups, many of which I mentioned, the Parkinson's, the BPH, who are waiting for their surgeries, and building awareness on that side to bring them to talk to their urologist and say, gee, I'd like to try this. And the other great and important thing that we have as a medical device company is unlike something like a coronary stent or like an implanted pacemaker. Okay. Once those things are in, they're never supposed to come out. Our device people are changing their Foley catheters every, either 4 to 12 weeks. Those intermittent catheters, you're using them day in, day out for months at a time. They can try our device. And if they like it, they can stay with it. If they don't, there is this switching cost, if you will. They can go right back to what they were using before because it won't work for every single patient. We understand that. But, for those for whom it is suitable, again, you have to have a decent level of manual dexterity to hold that magnet in the right general vicinity. But if you've got, if you're extreme with Parkinson's and you have very bad shakes, you might not be able to do it, but maybe a carer could do it for them. So, we're going to be working through, and we want to get people who can use it and will continue to use it for a longer period of time. Because we also think that if we can prove the reduction in infection, which we have a confidence about, and we will get there, we're sure. But once we've proven that, we believe that there will be not only improving a quality of life, but we may even be able to extend a life expectancy by reducing those infections, which ultimately can be terminal for people.
It's there's so many ways the outcomes look so rosy, but it seems to me that one of the challenges that you have, and I know this has been a particular challenge of comparing your product with
Yeah.
what's there in a clinical trial. Is
Yeah.
that a difficult problem to sort of overcome? Because it seems to me that it's a bit like, I don't know, Newcastle playing Gateshead. I mean, they've
Mhm.
got no chance against Newcastle. Just too good a team. So you've got this wonderful new product which should beat every other. But how do you set up a trial that
That's
yeah,
that's
that's going to
that
be
that's
favourable to you in a sense?
that's a great question, Graham, because before we got to where we are now with the NHS, and let me just again clarify for your audience. So we literally on the 12th of March, so just two and a half, 3 weeks ago, we signed the contract with the NHS, and that's for the next 2 years. That puts us onto that 4-year cycle.
Mhm.
We are the only ones in this channel. And earlier this week, the ordering codes are now available online for hospitals to be able to order. So we're right there. We can now start generating revenue. But when it comes to what we were doing before then, was we had set up a clinical study, and we tried to do it in the most sort of scientifically rigorous way possible, what's called a two-armed randomized study. And we said everybody who comes into the study has to have been on a Foley catheter, and then they'll be randomized. And they'll either get our device for 3 months or they'll stay on their Foley catheter for 3 months, and we'll compare these two groups of patients. After several months of trying to enroll, the enrollment was terrible. And we found out why. It's because everybody who was on a Foley catheter hated it so much that those people who could come into the study, a lot of them said, just tell me when it's available because I hate this thing and I don't want a chance. If there's something that I think is better out there, that I stay on this. We did have a couple of men come into the study on the hope that they'd get our device. They didn't, and they withdrew from the study. So it was to retool that study was um sorry was going to be too costly and too time consuming. So we've now got a new strategy, which is, and this is also because every time we bring it to a urologist, they want to explore something different about what our device could do for their patients. And, one of those examples, and we haven't talked about it yet, is the question of sex. And men who are living with particularly a Foley catheter, they it if you look up online, there are technically ways that you could have sex with a Foley catheter in with the tube coming out of you. It's not pretty to even think about.
No.
I can tell you that, again, strong anecdotal reporting from patients who are using our device for long periods of time, they can have sex with our device because there's nothing material. There's just two thin removal tethers, we call them, little, threads. But that does not interfere. And this is a big issue of quality of life for those patients. But then there are other things. The infection risk is one of the things that we'll be exploring. But ease of use, we could even look at, our patients staying hydrated better with our device.
Yeah.
Kevin, sorry, you want to say something?
I was just going to say that Ed has highlighted something in there that's peculiar to the NHS, may well apply to other health services. You will spend a lot of time just getting yourself on one of these frameworks. You're dealing with NHS procurement people. Now,
Mhm.
people think of the NHS as this one huge single entity. In practice, it isn't like that at all. And what you've got is you've got this procurement angle working independently. They're putting these frameworks out. They're just enabling hospitals to buy something. So they don't have to go and ask, individual hospitals don't have to go and raise tenders when they want to buy stuff. They just use the framework agreement. Somebody else has already negotiated the terms and conditions, the best prices, and all the rest of it. But just because you're on the framework, you've still got the job of convincing hundreds of hospitals, hundreds of doctors within each hospital that this is a good idea. Go use
Mhm.
it. So you've
Yeah.
actually now, okay, great. As of 2 weeks ago, you're on the framework. Sounds to me, though, Ed, that you're right at the start of a huge change management process across all of those hospitals and so on to actually get them to use it.
You're Kevin, you're absolutely right. And so the timing for us of that EAU Congress that I mentioned, we were able to generate between 25 and 30 leads just from UK NHS urologists and nurses. We're in the process of following that up. We've got a couple of what call early adopters, just putting it into pure business speak. You know, any new thing, even the cell phone, the first cell phones were sold to very rich, affluent people. But as time went on and people gained, the cost will come down and the adoption will go up. For us as a small company, we actually can get to a profitable position with probably less than 1,000 men using our device on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
But the opportunity that we have is honestly perhaps millions of men and eventually women as well worldwide benefiting. So where we are right now is we're finding those early adopters. And the other thing that the NHS is really helpful to us about is that each time we get a little case study or product evaluation experience, and that urologist can write that up, that then gets shared by the NHS innovation team out to others. And so people will build awareness and gain comfort and adoption with using our device. And I mean,
And that's the best sort of marketing possible for the product. When urologist recommends to urologist, you don't have to do anything. Once you've got the ball rolling, there's a
mhm.
snowball effect there. But
But not only that, Kevin, but actually I'll share with you another story. Graham's aware of it. I kid you not, about a year and a half ago, my cell phone rang and it was a number from the United States. And it was a guy who was living with a Foley catheter. And he was highly motivated because he really did not like his Foley catheter. I explained to this gentleman that he found our website. He actually found my cell phone number online somehow. And I explained to this guy, I said, look, we would love to be able to help you, but our device is not yet approved for use by the FDA. But I said, if you happen to find yourself in Europe, we've got a couple of places. He flew to Italy last summer. He was treated because we have a distributor in Italy who connected us with a urologist. This guy was treated. To this day, he's still using our devices on a continuous basis. And he's able to continue that usage in the US because of a small element of the FDA that says if you were treated outside of the US with something that was approved in that jurisdiction and your local physician is willing to support your continuance of care and it's deemed, correct, that urologist in the US has contacted me and said, how can I get more of these? And I said, I'm sorry, this is the only patient you can treat until we get that FDA approval. So, like I say, we're really excited by the number of different people that we'll be able to help. And as I say, people are so motivated to try something new that will improve their lives.
So, you're into profit if you can manage to get 1,000 customers using these. That feels to me as though the market opportunity is many, many times more than 1,000.
Well, again,
how
Kevin,
does a small company like yours scale then? If this suddenly takes off,
that
you
is,
might have 1,000 urologists in the NHS who, in 3 weeks' time, realize this is fantastic stuff.
yeah,
You've got 100,000 patients.
that is, Kevin, the as they call it, a really high quality problem for us to be solving. And we've got our COO. She is wonderful and is right on top of this stuff. The way we are operating, we're a private UK company. We have our devices are manufactured. We are the legal manufacturer, but we have a subcontract manufacturing partner. And the assembly of that valve is the most critically important element of the overall product manufacturing. And so training people in these clean rooms to be able to make these at a reliable rate, we just need to scale. We can scale by adding more people on the line, but we're also looking at adding a secondary contract manufacturer, again, still here in the UK. Eventually, we may go to another country to be able to scale and scale and scale. But we do think about individual groups of patients. So just here in the UK alone, there are men awaiting what's called a transurethral resection of the prostate. That is a prostate reduction surgery, also called a TURP. Before the pandemic, the number of men waiting 12 months or longer was 50,000. That number, I'm sure, has gone up because of the pandemic, and there's a limited number of urologists. So it's like a car accident on the M1. Once that waiting list is established, no matter how many urologists you add on, it's going to take a while for that number to come down. And that the big problem was the pandemic, which really shortened things, but lengthened that waiting list. So treating those men is one of our nearest terms opportunities. But there, like I say, there are a lot of other conditions as well.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up here, Ed, is that you're currently seeking around between 1 and 2 million just to effectively fund the commercialization of this product. And when you look at these early stage investors who might be interested in this, the sort of things that they're interested in is it ticks all the boxes that they're maybe interested in healthcare as an investing area. And when you look at the options for investing, property and all kinds of different things, usually healthcare's, I don't know, 25% or less. So out of every 100 investors, there might be 25 who might be willing to have that conversation. And if you're one of them, the next thing you might be looking for is looking for somebody who's got strong IP. And we've heard today from Ed, and the discussion that we've had so far is that he's got an incredibly strong IP and something that's valued by the NHS and the patients and all the rest of it. One thing they'll be looking for is a sort of some kind of, well, where to get the kind of money back? Because there are other people who've been in this broad area that you can perhaps talk to that. But the one thing that you've got to be, you've got to be either a sophisticated investor or a high net worth investor, because this is still a bit of it feels like you're putting your money on the horse that's going to win. But the truth is, it's still an investment that's corralled from the general population. But if you're a high net worth investor, and we've got quite a few of those listening, or a sophisticated investor, then this potentially is something you might want to think about. But when it comes to that sort of trade sale or an exit in some way, from an investor's point of view, what's the end point that you might have in mind?
So, Graham, that's a great question. And again, my background before doing this type of work is I was an investment banker for a number of different firms. I was ultimately a partner at a U.S. firm in, establishing their European business. I've worked on IPOs, mergers and acquisitions. I've raised debt. I've done restructurings. So what I know about where we can go with this business, technically, could we become a listed company in our own right? Possibly, yes, because like I say, once we get to profitability, we can determine our own pathway much more easily. But really, one of the things that motivates our board and our largest shareholders, is how we can get to help the most people the most quickly with this innovation. And frankly, the better way for us to do that is to actually sell this product and the product pipeline, that basically sell the business into one of the big players in the urology space already. Because, like I say, for us to scale our manufacturing, we can do that. We can get to, from 300 devices a month to 1,000 devices a month to 10,000 devices a month fairly easily. But ultimately, the opportunity is, what about making 500,000, 1 million devices a month? Well, that will take greater investment. But the other issue is getting those logistically out to the rest of the market. Other companies, the big companies like Coloplast, Becton Dickinson, B. Braun, Convatec here in the UK, they already have the, infrastructure and the sales and marketing muscle to really scale this business. And like I say, scaling is going to help more people more quickly. The other element it will do is it will bring down the cost of manufacturing, which then can make it more affordable, bringing it into a lot of those other markets that we alluded to earlier.
So if I can come to the point on this, Ed, if I'm looking to invest in this, you're looking for my particular investment to be of what size, and maybe over what period will I see some money back?
So again, we are a privately held, small amounts of tiny amounts of revenue right now, with the prospect of money from the NHS, assuming we can generate those orders. And we'd like to think that they will be coming soon.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of risk. We have already raised, roughly over the history of this company, we've raised about 6 million pounds to get us where we are today. In addition, we have been successful in the past at being awarded 4 separate UK government grant projects to develop this product, as well as bringing some of our others along. So what we're looking to do right now is raise what I really hope and expect will be our last amount of equity. And the total amount we're looking to raise is 2 million pounds. That whole 2 million would represent roughly 10% of the company. So if you think, okay, so the 2 is 10% of the post money number is 20, call it.
Yeah.
We believe that looking at other types of deals. Again, this is coming back to my M&A background. Other types of deals in the urology space that have the opportunity to create high quality recurring revenue. I don't know when this would happen, but I'd like to think that, you know, a typical venture capital return for a business like this usually should be roughly 10x your investment. Again,
Yeah.
we cannot guarantee, we would never guarantee. There
No.
are a lot of uncertainties, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the orders of magnitude.
So
That being
just
said, if there was a healthy auction for this business because we
yeah,
are unique,
yeah. And you've
might be more.
patented, and you've got a solution that on the prescribers and on the users, it's going to be a good solution. However, if you're putting in 25,000, 50,000,
Mhm.
then you might be walking away in a few years' time with, 250,000, 500,000, depending on how
Yeah,
things go. Could be a lot
yeah.
more than that. It might not be, it might be a bit less. But the point is
Mhm.
that there has got to be a way for an investor to find out a little bit more. Now, I know,
Sure.
because I've worked a little bit with you, that we have a site where you can actually leave your information and actually get the investor pitch deck. And that information you can find at ingenion.approvedinvestors.co.uk. And on there, you'll find that there is there's an ability for you to ask questions
Mhm.
of an agent, and it will actually display a capture device whenever you're ready to ask for it. And I think the important thing then is you have the opportunity of finding out a little bit more, but also leaving your details, and then you'll get that pitch deck, which gives you a little bit more information for you to sort of make your mind up. And then you can have a conversation with Ed, and I'm sure he'll be very happy to put his hand into your pocket and to relieve you of a few thousand quid. But but a very trustworthy chap as well. But Wharton educated, that isn't that bad, is it? Let's face it. So I've more or less tied up the investor side of it, Ed. But is there
Mhm.
anything else that you wanted to get across? Because this is a really important podcast from my point of view, because I think
Yeah.
you're really, I love it, Kevin. When we have a podcast, when somebody comes on, um, it's not like a high grade vodka or something like that.
Mhm.
Which is all very good for the people who are interested in that. But this is life changing stuff.
This is solving a real problem.
Real problem. Yeah.
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 I mean, I could regale you with lots of different stories, but actually, one that really is very, very close to my heart is that my wife, so I live in this country now for over 30 years, half my life roughly, and my wife is British, and that's part of why I'm here. One of her dearest friends, who sadly had passed away, he had multiple sclerosis, and he had it for 13 years. And then after 13 years, it was gradually getting worse. He eventually then needed a catheter, and he got a Foley catheter. And whereas coloplasts say that on average, you'll get 2.7 infections per year, and I mentioned how costly those are. In the last 2 years of his life, this guy was getting an infection every 4 to 6 weeks. And I feel so strongly that we wouldn't cure his MS, of course not. But if we could give him and his wife and their children a better quality of life, and like I say, I believe strongly that we will be able to demonstrate this reduction of infection, we would not only give him a better quality of life, but we could extend his life expectancy, I think, because he only lived for another 2 years with those Foley catheters. And ultimately, the reason for his death was pneumonia that was antibiotic resistant because he'd been getting so many infections that started off with the catheter that ultimately that was what led to his demise. So we want to improve people's quality of life and improve the life expectancy and give people the dignity that they deserve so that they can get on with their lives and be more productive.
Ed, we'll draw it to a close, but Ed Cappabianca, thank you very, very much for joining Kevin and I on the next 100 Days podcast.
A very, very interesting product, an interesting story. And what I think we must say right now is that we are not recommending investments. That is not our job. We simply brought Ed's story to the podcast today. If you like the sound of what Ed's been talking about and you do want to invest, that is down to you and your own risk. And go look at that investor pack that Ed mentioned. But there are some pluses, there are some minuses. This is still huge risk.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that the alternatives are suboptimal. This is yes, it's new, but the NHS themselves are no mugs. They've created their own what do you call it? Category for this particular solution to
within a framework, that says a lot for the product. That you've managed to get this medically approved, and B, you've managed to get it onto a framework so that people can buy it.
Yes,
those are two very, very big hurdles to get through, and that's just in the UK. As Ed said, they've got to do similar things in the US to get this approved, and that opens up a huge potential market.
But if one country like ours does it, then it'll make it so much easier for other countries, but also in like you're saying, in America and other big countries like India. I mean, China maybe. All of these countries will be gagging for it. Now, I'm probably a little bit more, what's the right word, certain about this, because I've had a chance to look at this opportunity for some time. But you're right, and Ed's coming along as a guest, and he has certain regulations that he's got to follow and so forth. But this is a podcast. What we're trying to do is share. I hope it's going to be good news. Now, whether you invest in it or not is as Kevin said.
I think it's just interesting to look at this from a number of angles. I mean, here we've seen a company that's raised some money, 6 million already, gone through quite a process. They're now saying, we need another couple of million to get to the next stage. Great. What's the best route to go and get it? In this case, it's get some more shareholders in the game, issue some more equity, dilutes the equity to those people who are already in the game. So they have to have a reasonable degree of confidence that in diluting their percentage ownership of the company right now, they're still going to get money out. But it's an interesting route that we're saying somewhere maybe 3, 5, whatever years down the line, the way that everybody is expected to make money out of this is that somebody will buy the company.
I think the thing is, when it comes to investment with high net worth investors and sophisticated investors, is that if you've got an investment of, let's just say, 50,000 quid, and you have a reasonable chance of several X, let's just say 3X, even if it was 3X, and after about, 5 years, you had 150,000. Do you reckon you get that from the bank?
No.
Or the building society?
No.
Or other kind of safe methods of raising? Yes, you could lose all 50,000. But on the other hand, we've heard today a story, and you can find out more information. And so you have to say that, and that's at 3. If you were to get to 10, and there are other examples that Ed didn't specifically mention, but in that field, who've had massive increments in terms of their value. So I think it's something that if you're an investor, have a look at it, because what's to lose? At least have a look at it. And as I said, the link will be in the show notes. And today, on a very interesting and hopefully something that you and I don't have to look at for a while subject. I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.